Good evening, everyone. My name is Amy Skillman, and I'm director of the MA in Cultural Sustainability at Goucher College. I want to welcome you to the last of our 5 webinars in the Spring chatFEST series. And before we begin, I just have a couple of quick reminders. Closed captioning is available if you want to click on the CC button. Should be at the bottom of your screen if you're on a computer. We are recording this, so if you prefer not to be on screen, simply turn off your video. Please keep your microphone on mute for now until we open it up for questions and comments from all of you at the end. That would be really great. And if you want, you can even put your view on speaker view so that you just see the speaker on your screen once we finish the slides. If a question does come up before we open it up for questions, please type that in the chat, and then either Taylor Seitsinger or I will make sure that it's asked. Taylor, by the way, is our graduate student admissions counselor, and I'll be sharing both her email address and mine in a few minutes. And Taylor, but in the meantime, Taylor's going to be helping out with putting some links in the chat and keeping an eye on any questions that you might have. We do call this the chatFEST series because they're really designed as conversations or chats with some opening remarks by our guest and then a kind of moderated dialogue and then questions from you all. So we do encourage you to communicate using the chat function. And if you feel like it, go ahead and write something in the chat right now about who you are, where you're calling in from, and maybe why you're here. So tonight's conversation, as I said, concludes our semester-long series, but you might be able to catch a few other webinars that are being offered by some of our other graduate programs. And I wanted to be sure to highlight this one coming up from the Historic Preservation Program on May 7th, because I think it's relevant to people who might be interested in our webinar series. This is with Tristram Evans, who is an alum from the Historic Preservation Master's Program, and it's entitled Navigating Heritage, Charting a Course to Narrative Equity. And it's about his proposal for a recalibrated heritage framework that centers individual narratives and elevates the importance of a landscape approach, and that includes community and culture to heritage work in general. And we are starting now to schedule our webinars for the summer and for the fall. So I've put here some of our anticipated topics for summer and fall, and there's a QR code that will take you to the page where you can register, either for the remaining sessions in this semester or for our future sessions. And you can also find that page under Events and Visiting Campus, which is a link on the right-hand side on the Max homepage. And Taylor will put all of those lovely links into the chat for you so you can follow up. Now, if you've missed any of our previous conversations, you can access recordings of those on our YouTube channel, which is Cultural Sustainability at Goucher College. And the webinars are organized in playlists by semester. So all of the spring webinars this semester that have been really looking at the future of culture are organized under spring 2025, but you can look at the fall webinars, et cetera. And again, my QR code will take you there, but Taylor also has the link for the YouTube channel, which she'll share with you in the chat. So all of these programs are sponsored by the MA in Cultural Sustainability at Goucher College. It's a master's program that will be celebrating its 15th anniversary this year on May 24th on Goucher's campus. And many of our webinars are aligned either with, specifically with our courses, either they are authors whose work we are reading in our courses, or they are guests in those courses, and therefore sort of enhancing the conversation in those courses. So, I think they give you a little bit of a sense of what we teach. And tonight's conversation with Maria Gabriela Aldana connects really nicely with our oral history class, which is a course that we teach on a regular basis. So if any of that interests you, here is a QR code that will take you to information about the MA program if you want to learn more. And as I said, I've also included Taylor's email address and my email address. If you have questions about the program or admissions process, feel free to reach out to Taylor. If you have questions about the program, the format, our faculty, our courses, you can reach out to me, but both of us are really happy to set up some time to talk with you. So about our program tonight. Our conversation tonight is with Maria Gabriela Aldana. She is the Director of Art of Solidarity and has been working in partnership with the Baltimore Museum of Industry to lead a community-centered oral history and video project honoring firsthand accounts from the people most impacted by the tragic collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in the Baltimore Harbor just a little over a year ago on March 26, 2024. Her collection includes port workers, small business owners, first responders, social workers, and of course, family members of the 6 men who fell into the Patapsco River and died that evening. I think Taylor will put a link to Art of Solidarity, which is Maria's organization, in the chat if you want to learn more about her organization. A little bit about Maria. She is a bilingual artist, community organizer, oral historian, folklorist, and teacher. For over 20 years, she has produced murals, exhibitions, parades, films, festivals, and multicultural events. Originally from Managua in Nicaragua, Ms. Aldana is a proud immigrant, raised in Miami and now living in Baltimore. She earned her BFA from the Maryland Institute College of Art in 2003, so she's been here for quite a while, and was part of the first group in the USA to earn the MA in Community Arts, also from MICA in 2006. She founded Be More Cultured in 2004, which organized a volunteer group of Black youth in Baltimore to venture to Nicaragua as African American ambassadors to live in solidarity with rural communities. I'd love to know more about that at some point. She then co-founded Art of Solidarity with Alex Martre, which continued their partnership with Nicaragua until I think 2016, maybe 2018. Maybe you can correct me on that, Maria. Maria served as the first community arts manager for Creative Alliance in Baltimore and was promoted to education director, where she doubled the organization's youth and education programs. And I have visited some of those youth programs, and they're truly amazing. She also founded and directed Artesanas Americanas and Neighborhood of Voices, among other social justice and family programs. Aldana also has received the prestigious award for Top 30 Visionaries in Baltimore by Baltimore Magazine. So please join me in welcoming Maria Gabriela Aldana. I will stop sharing so that you can start sharing.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here with you at Goucher. It's been phenomenal getting to know a little bit about your Masters of Arts program and cultural sustainability. I know I'm very interested and see a lot of intersections. I hope that this collection of oral and video histories that I was able to produce in partnership with the Baltimore Museum of Industry serves as firsthand accounts for anybody that's interested in research and anything related to Key Bridge history as well as ethnography. So I'm going to share my screen. And if there's any questions, please feel free to type it in the chat so that you don't forget. And then we can revisit those at the end. If you could give me a thumbs up that you see this presentation, awesome. Thank you so much. Wow, I'm sort of blown away by that biography. That's intensive. So when people ask me if I'm married or have children, I'm like, "Oh no, I'm too young for that." Uh, yeah, it's kind of cool when you take a step back and you take a look at all of the people you've gotten a chance to work with. So thank you for that lovely introduction. If you would like to contact me, it's very, very easy. You can email me at maria@artofsolidarity.org. It's at the bottom middle of your screen. And there's also a contact form on our website, www.artofsolidarity.org. If you click on artofsolidarity.org, it takes you here. It is in the chat. And you can see some of the active programs happening now, such as the Keybridge Stories Summer Youth Council. And if you click on Community Arts, you can see all of our past work that is documented and appropriate to put on here, including activism work in Nicaragua through mural and video documentation work, as well as field work in the Atlantic coast. So lots of resources here. It's all free. Um, so check that out. I also encourage you, if you have a moment, to visit the Baltimore Museum of Industry. It's a beautiful museum. I don't think people go there enough. And they are working on an exhibition that will be coming in 2027. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Today, the focus of this presentation is really taking a look at what it means to do an oral history in terms of tragedy. What were some of the decision making processes and challenges, as well as ongoing reflections of how to come together during times of trauma and to be able to heal together, and who has not been able to heal yet and why. We went over my biography. If you're really interested, it is in the website. So, Echoes from the Key Bridge, some of the goals of that project, first and foremost, was to honor the families of the victims. Through partnerships, I was able to connect with the families directly and offer this opportunity to record their story. Secondly, it's to create a community centered oral history and video project. My background is uh, a community based artist. And what that means is that instead of creating a mural by myself at home in a studio practice, which is a lovely way to work, it's not very satisfying for me. And I am most creative when I work with other people and it is connected to current events. So I like to create works of art or collection or documentaries that really honor people most impacted by the social issue. Thirdly, is to create an archive collection at the Baltimore Museum of Industry and to really diversify that collection. Fourth is to document firsthand accounts, including port workers, small businesses, first responders, and social workers. One of my personal goals was to take the oral histories, turn them into video histories, and with additional funding, perhaps create short films to really synthesize who was most impacted, what is their experience with the collapse, what is what does the bridge mean to them in terms of their family's history, um, and what does it mean for them without the bridge? What were the direct hardships that they have had to face? Currently now, the BMI, the Baltimore Museum of Industry, that I'm calling the BMI, they are in the process of creating an exhibit. I believe it will happen in another 2 years. And finally, a call to action. This is a behind the scenes look of the archives located on the second floor of the museum. I was able, through the Baltimore National Heritage Area Grant, to extend the project to collect an additional 16 video oral histories. And what was really, really great about that is that the initial 16 oral histories were a few months spaced apart from the video oral histories. So when I was able to interview the same person, you could already see that there was new issues to try to tackle, um, and perhaps a sense of reflection and lessons that they had learned with some gained perspective. This photo was taken by the BMI's archivist, Maggie Marzoff, who was an incredible asset to this project. Without her, I would not have had the sanity to really put one foot in front of the other. She was really a tremendous person and a wonderful resource right here in Baltimore. On December 3rd was our first public program, and it was a panel of folks that are part of the Oral History Project, as well as artists responding to the tragedy. And as we know, when we live in Baltimore, it is sort of a small city feel, and even in Baltimore County, people really felt this as if it happened in their backyard, and for some people, it literally happened in their backyard. So we saw a lot of artwork and people coming to the museum and asking, "Hey, would you be interested in photos as part of your archives?" I made a painting honoring the victims. So I was able to sit down with some of these folks and ask them what the Key Bridge meant to them, um, and then reshare those stories with the public. This is an overview of that panel discussion and some of the other activities that were taking place so that people could gather, they could reflect, they could mourn. And we also made it a point to honor the victims by holding moments of silences as the family members were in the audience. Let me know if you thumbs up. Thank you.
The Oral Histories project that we call Echoes from a Key Bridge, the purpose of that is to listen to people from various perspectives and try to document all walks of life.
Through this particular tragedy, I think what we wanted to do is make sure that the victims' families and the survivors, all who were construction workers, were protected where they did not have protections.
Para Alejandro Hernández Fuentes, reconocemos su partida.
Well, about your day job, or night job, I'm not sure what you did.
The first thing that I saw was a repeat of an accident, a repeat of a state of captions describing the Key Bridge accident. Immediately, I had phone calls, I had text messages, making sure that I was okay, that I wasn't at work.
I think the common thread of humanity. And when it comes to matters of the heart, there really is no compensation. This tragedy pulled people together. Information is power.
I often get asked in terms of oral history, what is my process and how did I, as an independent contractor, how was I brought into the museum? So one of the first things I asked for was to create an advisory committee that would really help us determine the goals and with strategy behind it, and really get people to identify who are some of these key people we wanted involved in the project. Through that research, I was able to call people, email them, folks that I would never have access to, thanks to that advisory committee. And it was a lot of longshoremen were on that committee, um, port businesses, as well as social workers and first responders from local government agencies in Baltimore County and Baltimore City. Then I, would set up and coordinate, which took a lot longer than expected. I think there was a lot of interest at first, but it took maybe twice as long to really nail down who was available, when and where, those kinds of logistics. And then once someone agrees to it, it's really important to me to make them feel as comfortable as possible in terms of making sure that the technical aspect is taken care of before anyone physically shows up to the space, or if I'm going into their home or if I'm going to someone's office, to keep staff as small as possible and to let everybody know what to expect. Um, and finally, when someone starts speaking and sharing their story, to actively listen and to concentrate as much as I can on what they're saying. And that is giving them my full attention, deepening what they're saying in moments of natural pauses to deepen that conversation so that it is very unique to their experience. And afterwards, following up, providing copies if that's something that they want, editing it if that is something that they want, and then, if the copyright allows, to share their story with their permission. So, one of the cool things about this process was creating choices for people to understand copyright a little bit and saying if your story is very vulnerable to the point where you want to be anonymous, or you may want to limit the time that it is available to the public, maybe consider owning the copyright. If you prefer that Artist Solidarity and the BMI hold on to that copyright, you can transfer your story to us, or if you want it to be part of public domain, that would be the third option so that it's shared most easily. This is Wendell Supreme Shannon. He is someone that was key in really getting workers that were most impacted to talk to me, to sit down with me, and to build that trust. It's so important in trying to create a genuine relationship with someone. Um, so he's someone I want to give a massive shout out to, and someone that you should look up if you want to hear additional stories. He was an artist, well, he is an artist. He's a graphic design painter, and he creates paintings while he's on the port waiting for cargo ships to come in, and that takes hours, and it is a little bit unpredictable. So during that downtime, he creates paintings. He sold paintings so that he was able to fundraise money and support his fellow colleagues during this time of need. Another common question I get asked in terms of oral histories is, how do you interview? In this project, I think it was really, really important to be transparent about the grant money that we had received. Initially, it was $25,000 from the Baltimore Community Foundation, and then an additional funds from the Baltimore National Heritage Area. And through that second source of money, we were able to sort of correct the errors of the first grant proposal and say we really need to offer honorariums or donations to charities of that person's choice. Um, Being yourself is really important, but I think it takes practice to find that balance of being yourself and also being very professional. I think before hitting the record button, sitting down with someone for a few minutes and review how their story will be archived and shared, going through that paperwork together. Um, Interviewing someone in their own language is very important. I believe that is why I got hired to this very prestigious position, was as a fluent Spanish speaker and English speaker. And of course, in my ability to listen, repeat, and deepen as someone who documents people's stories for a living. And finally, following up. Um, One of the greatest collaborations I've had was working with WYPR. I've worked with them twice to take clips from people's stories and put together sort of synopsis of what are people saying? So I encourage you to look up On the Record. You can type up my name On the Record, and you'll see my conversation with Ashley Stern and produced by Melissa Gear. So these are really outstanding documentations of where I sit down and really talk about the stories that are part of the collection, but also lessons of what are people saying. And I talk about key partnerships, the immediate response, the sort of alarming lessons that people learned of, oh, I didn't know I could work with you so closely, and I didn't know you could do that, and sort of building their toolbox as they went, and knowing what someone could provide in moments of need. I wanted to share with you a brief clip of the video oral histories with Juliana Valencia Banks, who is the Baltimore County Chief of Immigrant Affairs. This is a new position. She is the first person to ever hold this position, so it's pretty amazing. And she also served as an advisory committee member to me, so that I was able to really have a council of people that I can go to for advice in making some of these decisions. So I will show you a clip of this. Let me know if you can hear it by giving me a thumbs up.
You know, the March 25th, 2024 was, I think, a pretty normal night, right? Came home from work, ate dinner, went to sleep. Woke up, I'm not a good sleeper, so I wake up throughout the night and immediately saw that the bridge had collapsed. And then we started getting the text messages. I was scheduled to attend a educational conference put on by Maryland Latinos Unidos in Montgomery County that day. And in the morning was texting back and forth with the director of the Office of Community Engagement, and let her know, hey, I'm going to be at this conference, but I'll be available by text. And as I was driving to Montgomery County, we found out that there was a work crew on the bridge when it collapsed, and like in the pit of my stomach, I knew that it was going to be immigrants, and that it was most likely going to be Latino immigrants. And I headed to the Central Command, which was the site where all of the first responders, the public safety were at, where they did the press conferences at, and asked our chief of emergency management if I could go meet with the families. Briefly, I just wanted to check in on them. Unfortunately, language access is not always addressed well across different agencies, and so I wanted to make sure that if indeed there were families with limited English proficiency, that somebody was there that could interpret. I'm not a certified interpreter or translator, but I have done it enough in professional settings where I can serve in that role in emergency situations. And I was really pleased when I arrived at the place where the families were being held at, that the FBI had sent in about 5 interpreters, fluent English to Spanish, that are the best trained interpreters I've ever worked with. Like, they did not miss a word. They could interpret words that are very technical, because the family was receiving information about the dives and the length that divers could go down, the equipment that was being used. And I have so much respect for that team of interpreters, because they were able to respond in a time where families really needed to get accurate information. When I, saw that there was interpreters, I then thought about what other things they needed, right? And I have to say, this entire time, I think from 6:30 in the morning until probably like 2:30 in the morning that day, Catalina Rodriguez Lima and I, the director of the Mayor's Office in Immigrant Affairs, had been texting. the entire time. Like, we spent 15 hours texting back and forth. And I let her know there's interpreters, looked for the crisis response folks. And while they're very competent and really kind, talented people, they didn't speak Spanish. So I asked the commander on site if I could reach out to, and there was a chaplain also from the Maryland State Police. And I asked if I could reach out to some faith community leaders that were from the Latino community, and also some bilingual social workers that could address the needs of the families. And they said that I could do that. So while I was doing that, Catalina and I were strategizing and thinking about what are these families going to need, right? From the time I arrived until probably, I think it was like noon, there was hope that it would be a rescue mission, that the teams would find folks that were still alive. And unfortunately, because that night had been so cold and the temperature in the water was so cold, the dive team was pretty certain that it was not going to be a rescue mission, that it was going to be a recovery mission. And so we were there kind of thinking about, okay, well, if they're losing their primary breadwinner, money is going to be the immediate need, but then also navigating this system that is very challenging, right? If somebody has ever lost a loved one, the normal process of grieving and the process of like creating an estate, closing an estate, and taking care of like whatever is available to heirs is very different than what these families were going through, right? And so how we were going to be able to meet those needs and how we were going to be able to support the families, and also being mindful that it was going to be work in coalition, that the federal, state, and local government were going to have to work in partnership, not only for like the recovery of the men that were lost, but also in the recovery of the economics of the local area, and in the support for the families and what they were going to need, and really being thoughtful about who we brought in. We created a work group. We brought in Casa Maryland, which is a nonprofit member-led organization that works with immigrants across the different diasporas in labor, immigration, social justice issues, and Catholic Charities. Esperanza Center, which is a direct service provider based in Baltimore City, and work together to assess the needs of the families and address their needs. And we immediately started also thinking about fundraising, because the families were going to need financial support. Many families don't have that cushion that gets them through 3 months of an emergency, right? And so also thinking about the need to fundraise and partner with an organization that's going to be able to fundraise for the families and not for their own self-interest. Unfortunately, you know, we saw the best and the worst of humanity when it came to money for the families. We saw people create GoFundMes that were not connected to the families at all in any way, and raised significant money. And so we worked with the Latino Racial Justice Circle, which is a nonprofit that is not a direct service provider, but they raise funds for immigration legal services and small scholarships, and also do workshops around immigration and social justice issues to create a fundraiser for the families. Through the coalition that we created, led by Catalina, we had 2 different work groups, one that assessed the case management need and also the immigration legal services. So we met, talked about the needs of the families, connected them to services, identified gaps, and then there was also a work group to look at the money that was raised and figure out how that money was going to be dispersed.
So the reason I wanted to start with Juliana is that she goes through the process of talking about what these key partnerships look like, and she names a lot of them and talks about their particular expertise, and then she discusses how they were able to make decisions on how these funds would be distributed in an equitable process. Since the families were of different sizes, there's still are children of various ages, there are dependents that these men were taking care of back in their home country, in addition to the family they have here locally in the United States. And the reason why I bring that up is because in recent news, the Baltimore Community Foundation, I'm calling here BCF, received a lot of backlash because they received $16 million for the Key Bridge disaster relief. This is a screenshot from the Baltimore Banner. Unfortunately, none of it went to the victims' families. This is a screenshot of why that's a problem. So they raised 16 million, and this is what they said that money would be used for. And the first thing you see on here is families work with the Baltimore Civic Fund. The Baltimore Civic Fund is through the mayor's office of immigrant and multicultural affairs. They had met with each other. The Baltimore Community Foundation asked them for advice on how are you going to distribute these funds. So while Juliana was working in partnership for the Baltimore Civic Fund, it just sort of lost track of its initial goal and went to finance three major organizations, and none of them really are working directly with the families whatsoever. And in talking with Amy just before this presentation, as of today, there's another article where the Keybridge families will get 1.2 million from the Baltimore Community Foundation due to the backlash that you can still see on social media. And the CEO of Baltimore Community Foundation was very responsive in saying, we messed up, without saying that, and saying we're going to try and fix it as best we can. So there's some good news out of sharing people's stories, coming together through the Key Bridge tragedy, and figuring out who's doing good work, who has the most positive impact, and who we should give money to, in other words. These are some photos of the memorial site from a prominent artist from Texas named Roberto Marquez, seen here with the cowboy hat. He let me borrow these, and they were sort of recreating the truck that one of the victims was found in, although it did not look like that. It was crushed like a soda aluminum can when it was found, and the family went to go see that truck when it was salvaged from the Patapsco River. And here's a section of the mural that is now that Mr. Marquez graciously gave to the Baltimore Museum of Industry for free. And you see people who are literally writing messages of hope, messages of love that are direct relatives of the victims, as well as strangers who wrote in their native language, whether it was Farsi, Arabic, English, and they're saying, we will never forget you. So one of the key lessons that I've gathered from all of this research is, who can we trust? And trust is important in terms of, I think, measuring a community and a city's wealth in a lot of ways. It's mental health, it's fabric. And these organizations have been really impressive in the way that they responded to this. So I just want to give them a mention in case you're interested in learning more about them. Casa de Maryland, Esperanza Center of Catholic Charities, Baltimore County Office of Immigration Affairs. I think I said that wrong earlier. I think it's Baltimore County Office of Immigration Affairs. Mayor's Office of Immigrant and Multicultural Affairs, MEMA. They ran and are still running the Baltimore Civic Fund and the Latino Racial Justice Circle, which was the first to launch a GoFundMe and raised over $98,000 in under 24 hours. Alma Fringpong, I had the pleasure of speaking with her and 3 staff from Casa de Maryland. This is her video. Do we have time to share this? Yeah? Okay. Let me know if you can hear it.
What we see, or what within my department, what we work with, or the groups of people with whom we work the most, are people who have suffered some form of persecution in their home country, or who have suffered some form of or who've been a survivor of some form of crime here within the United States. One thing that we really pride ourselves on at CASA is just the fact that we're still fighting towards a pathway to lawful permanent residence and naturalization for all, right? But while we continue on that fight, we are also continuing to push for temporary forms of protection, right? So temporary protected status, DACA, right? Things like that, so that, even if people may not have a pathway to permanent residence, they still will have some opportunity, right, for temporary protection that allows them to continue living here, working here, and being united with their loved ones. I knew the bridge. I had driven on the bridge. I would see the bridge, right? Just a few minutes away from my house. Then as news stories started to come out, and as, of course, with CASA being so uniquely positioned, right, such that, we're just in such a trusted place with our immigrant community members within our region, right, it inevitably came to be that some of the impacted community members, some of the victims, were CASA members, right? And so that news started to come out. This wasn't, quote, like just another tragic incident, right? Like this was home, right? Like this hit home. This was, not only was it right around from my house, right? So like physically home, but this was our people, right? This was our community that was suffering this tragedy. On that day, I was meant to be at CASA in this exact position. And within those first few days was where I really came to understand what CASA means, what CASA does, and the role that CASA plays when tragedies like this happen. We understand the calling, and we understand the task, and we show up, and we show out, and we do what our community needs us to do. So within a few days, right, we were already set up at a church conducting consultations for affected family members. In this time of tragedy, you had family members who now were grieving alone. You had spouses who were like, I just want my mother here with me. You had siblings who were like, our dad needs to be able to be here, right? It's just, it's the all I could think about was like, family members should be able to grieve together. Like family members need to be together in this time of tragedy. They need to be able to mourn together, and they need to be able to celebrate the lives of their loved ones together. And so that really was where CASA led, of like, how are we going to unite family members? Very quickly after conducting those first round of legal consultations at that church, just a few days after the incident, we were already working with several agencies, several senators' offices, right? Senator Chris Van Hollen's office, Governor Westmore's office, right? We were working with the Department of State, right? We were working with Department of Homeland security. I mean, just places, spaces, agencies, things that I did not know could come together in such a manner, just to make sure that family members could quickly come to the United States, which for anyone who knows anything about immigration law knows that it is not an easy feat, right? We just finished talking about the narrow pathways that exist to lawful permanent residents, and there are even more narrow pathways to be able to visit the United States. So being able to move quickly, rapidly to get tens of family members from their home countries and in Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador to come to the United States during that moment, forever will be one of the greatest accomplishments and greatest honors of my life. That family members in their time of sorrow, tragedy, trusted us, right? Trusted me to be able to work with them to get this done. And to not only have their family members, loved ones come over here to be able to mourn together, grieve together. I mean, you know, they were able to do things like go to the site of the tragedy together, right? Like for a father who was outside of this country when this happened, to be able to come to this country and to be able to join in a journey to go see the site, right? For loved ones to be able to have one last look at these people who suffer such a tragic public death, right? To be able to have those moments with each other. I'm so grateful that we were able to work to make that happen. But we were also able to do the incredible task of having family members go from the United States to their home countries to bury their loved ones and come back lawfully. Which again, just incredible, amazing. I don't know that we'll ever be able to do it again, but just to know that it was even possible and to know what is possible for our community members when they suffer such tragedies, and think, well, it shouldn't only be available when we suffer such tragedies, right? Like, family members should be able to be together, period. And so it gave us hope, right? It has given me hope. It has opened my eyes to like what is possible. What can we do for our community? What can we do for our families, separated families, right? Children who've been apart from their parents for so many years, right? Like, look at what is possible to be able to get them to come back together. What
At the end of questions, I can show you another video that I spent 2 months editing. The videos I showed you are very lightly edited, whereas there's a documentary that is made. It's about 10 minutes long, and it's going to premiere in film festivals this year. I will let you know if you want to sign up for our newsletter where they will premiere, but it's about Scott Ambrose and his life as a longshoreman, a community member, business owner. And it's the first of 5 video documentaries. So that's how this project is continuing. This is a sneak peek interviewing Roberto Marquez. Other calls to action, you can follow Casa de Maryland for a lot of their ongoing advocacy work. And before we get into questions, and I see that there's questions in the chat, thank you for using the chat. I wanted to just take a moment of silence and really honor this project and the work of those that are invisible, that are doing undesirable jobs, who risk their lives every single day for us. Mi sentido pésame a Carlos Daniel Hernández, Alejandro Hernández Fuentes, Minor Yacir Suazo Sandoval, Miguel Ángel Luna González, José Minor López, Dorlian Ronial Castillo Cabrera.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. It's your presentation really demonstrates, I think, the larger community impact of an event like this, and the and who that larger community is. You know, from the longshoreman that worker to the city of the Baltimore, mayor's office, and then all the nonprofit organizations in between that are doing such important work as well. And you talk about this as a community-centered oral history project, and I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about what that means to be community-centered. I mean, I'm very curious. Did you say you did 16 interviews and then you got to go back and do 16 videos with the same 16 people?
So there's a total of
Yeah.
32. Some of
Okay.
them are of the same people, but the most of the video oral histories are of new candidates. So it's a mix.
Okay. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, how many of them were actually family members, and how many of them were the larger kind of community? Do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, so the project was offered to the families first, and we met with them in September in a private meeting.
Mhm.
There was all kinds of updates that they needed, and this was one of the things on that agenda. But we offered it to them and said, we'd love to document your story and honor your loved one. Everybody was interested, everybody was fascinated. However, not everyone could participate. I mean,
Mhm.
as you know, telling a story is sharing a part of your soul, and for some people that was asking too much. So
Yeah.
I gave it about a year. No, I'm sorry, that's wrong. About 6 months I had to wait, and at that point it opened up room for other people. So there was two widows who were able to share their story,
Mhm.
and we have um, longshoremen. We have two small business women-owned businesses that work directly on the port. We have firefighters, um, and then we have social workers that were there
Mhm.
on the scene, psychotherapists that work directly with the families to sort of speak on what was that like without bothering the families too much.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's great. So, so to my question then, what does it mean to do a community-centered oral history project? How is that different than maybe the way oral history projects have been done in the past? You have a sense of that?
I wish there was more time. I really we had a lot of brainstorming sessions of who has access to us and how can we really get down to the people most impacted. So while I have relationships with them now, they're not necessarily part of the collection, but it doesn't mean that they can't be in the future. So I think for me, it's about relationship building. And while it might not be an outcome of the project when the project ends, the relationship is the greatest outcome of all. So I think that's where the community centered goal comes in. So you may not hear from the child that really wants to recite their poem about their dad in the museum's exhibit, but the fact that the child knows about the museum and knows about the collection is now building community.
Nice.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
going to follow on from Amy, your question. I love the project, by the way, and it's very moving. And I mean, it's always interesting when, I'm not in Baltimore, I'm up in Philadelphia, so I was certainly aware of this, but you sort of lose track of what was a news event, but of course it's just a hugely important life event for so many people. So it's, very powerful and helpful to be reminded of it. But this notion of community, I always love to unpack a bit, because I think one of the things, and that was what I posted in the chat a bit about, was, it sounds like it was really multiple communities that, that is the people who work there represented, as I think you were saying, a range of cultural backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds and linguistic and so on. So it's sort of like an intersection of communities. Of course, they form in some sense a working community, but I wonder, how did that play out? It's not a simple community, and that it's a place in a rural place that has a little monolithic. It's much more complex than that, and I'm sure people's work lives and relationships varied a lot. It seems like, I imagine it's, I don't know what the economics of that work are. Do people get paid okay, or is it more of a kind of, working class job, or is it unionized? Or you're just curious a little bit more about the complexity of community there.
I love that. That's a really, really great question. That's primarily why I focused on Scott Ambrose. He has a union job. It pays very well. They just received a significant raise from the strike against automation of their job. For thousands of workers in the United States. So I really like to think about the community of longshoremen as a community, right? Like you're saying, that there's multiple communities, and
Yeah,
the way that they operate, which is predominantly people that have citizenship and hold a certain um, I don't I did not see generational wealth there, but I definitely saw people being able to have a steady paycheck,
yeah,
and a paycheck with potential
mhm,
to climb up the ladder, versus construction workers that are working very difficult hours at night by themselves in crews without supervision, without safety
right,
equipment that could have saved lives, without walkie-talkies that could have better communicated an emergency when the electricity went out on the cargo ship, without qualifications for workers' comp. These are 1099 jobs, I believe, through Bronner Builders, who was their employer. While they might have really nice interpersonal relationships, the employer itself has, from what I've heard, what's the word? Fines? They're not up to protocol in terms of like their safety regulations.
yeah,
So no, these jobs are not sought after for those reasons.
right,
It was very interesting when you take a look at, you know, do I want to become a construction worker? Do I want to become a longshoreman? I mean, you definitely want a job that will be unionized and will offer you workers' compensation, healthcare, life insurance.
yeah.
So
I was reminded, I'm a filmmaker, and many years ago, I made a film with a folklorist colleague, Maggie Holtzberg, on railroad workers in the South called Gandy Dancers, and very hard work and a lot of manual labor. But it actually, for black workers in Alabama at the time, it was a well sought after job. So the sort of impressions or stereotypes we bring to work can vary a lot depending on where they are in their trajectories, what opportunities they have, etc. So yes.
exactly. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I love being able to kind of tease apart like the complexity of community and um yeah. Um Elsa, Zarita, Kaylin, Sandra, anybody else have a question that you'd like to ask? Why were these workers not unionized given given their work is unionized? So why were these workers not unionized?
Yeah, I mean, the nature of the work is typically union work. How did this employer manage to avoid?
I don't know if that's a question you can answer, right, Maria? I mean, it's you're nodding your head like you can, or like you're agreeing with me you can't.
Oh, I don't have an answer for it other than exploitation.
Yeah.
A lot of workers are exploited, and a lot of workers don't know what their rights are, and they don't qualify because of various reasons. One of them, a significant one, is citizenship status, and how
Yeah.
someone could be in the process of obtaining their citizenship for 10, 25 years. And it really
Mhm.
depends on, do you have evidence that you're seeking asylum? Um, in my particular case, my family and I came over here in 1986, and the laws were very different back then. And the fact that we were from Nicaragua, in a country where war was imposed and funded by the United States, I mean, they had clear evidence that, okay, there are people fleeing from war, and this is a war that we imposed. So it was easier to obtain political asylum then than it is now.
Mhm.
So that could be part of the reason they're not unionized, and they're also not staff per se. They might have the hours of a full-time employment, but you know, um, I believe these jobs are independently contracted, so you don't
Yeah.
qualify um, for health insurance, medical insurance, life insurance, workers' compensation, things like that.
It's sort of the classic, what's H4N um, jobs that are, the hardest jobs to do that a lot of Americans don't want to do, right? Yeah.
It was not my understanding. I am a labor lawyer, and it's not for this type of work, and I worked for the government. But it's my understanding that there's no requirement to be a citizen in order to join a union. But the fact that they are given work as independent contractors, which is itself something that's been regulated and is not exactly a legal opportunity, that they should be
Right, especially if they're working full time, right?
they shouldn't be considered independent contractors, because the nature of the work they're doing is not a separate business. They're
Mhm.
under the auspices, the control, the law, the regs of the employer. So they're not really independent contractors. So that's why I wondered why. I guess maybe there aren't enough of these kinds of workers for unions to get involved, or maybe it's a political thing, they don't want to. Um,
Yeah, I would love to talk with you some more, Elsa, because I'm learning so much from you right now. I did not know. I did not know that. It might just be lack of knowledge, you know?
Yeah.
often, often
And
it's
access, and also access.
right.
If nobody is doing that organizing work in that group, that's another why
Mhm.
is that the case, right? Why is nobody organizing in that group? I have another kind of 10,000 foot level question, that we often think about oral history projects as documenting a moment in time, documenting people's reflections and memories back on something that happened at one point, documenting a lifelong journey for somebody. But this is actually documenting a moment in time right now, right? And what I love about your approach, Maria, is that it's also very much about social justice, right? So, it's an example of using the tools of oral history to gather the stories that can possibly maybe make change right now. And I wondered if you have any more thoughts about that, that you'd like to share. I mean, your intentionality around that. You know, I think this is yeah. If you had anything you want to add.
Yeah, I sort of see my partnership with the museum as, I don't want to say strictly research, but primarily research. And then now that the research is done and it's in the process of being archived and hopefully will be open to the public soon. It's
Mhm.
about analyzing, well, what have I heard? And the things that we know, we already know, but now we have this sort of like news stories to motivate people. Maybe perhaps what comes out of it is um, maybe it's films, that's something that I can do, that I can shape someone's stories with someone else's story so that now we are modeling um, contrast. It's like, well, here's this person and here's this person. Why are they different? And why is this person recovered and healed and this person has not?
Mhm.
What are some of the um, access issues, whether it's language or it's economic or um, accept discrimination, whatever it is spending more time with those and seeing how can I tell those stories? Because I have all of this research, but now I think for me, it's about building a new advisory committee, perhaps, and listening to them and um, organizing public programs around it. So, like I said, it could be short films that bring these topics together. It could be partnering with unions and saying, what are you doing? How can we shine a light on what you're doing? Um, it could be working with some of these foundations that want to do good work but aren't on the ground with people and connecting them with people that are. So those are
Yeah.
two primary examples.
Yeah,
Well, I think, oh, go ahead, Barry.
I was just curious, maybe you touched on this, I'm sorry if I missed it, but what's the future look like for these folks? And I'm not quite up to date on the current state of the bridge, but I assume it's still years away from being reopened, is that right? And the port area is still going to be impacted for a while.
Shipping has started up again,
Okay.
but the bridge has not. And now they're focusing on the Chesapeake Bay Bridge and making sure that it's going to not collapse if somebody hits it,
Right,
right?
right. Yeah, no, I heard
So,
some piece about how somebody went around doing studies of a lot of other bridges that
yeah,
be vulnerable. I think a couple in Philly port as well. But
right, yeah.
anyway, what's
One of
what's the future look like for these workers and their jobs?
yeah, that's an excellent question. I know that, the one survivor who fell in and who cannot swim and was able to, I mean, nobody knows why or how, lack of a better word, miracle.
Yeah,
The light was on his helmet, and that's how the divers were able to find him. And
yeah,
he was just like, um, what's the word, laying on like a piece of steel, and that's how they were able to find him. He's still working for Bonner Builders. He's a really positive, amazing human being and has taken on, from what I see, a fatherhood figure role for his cousin who did pass away, and he was there and experienced the same collapse. um, I don't know what his future holds. I'm very concerned for the widows who are by
Mhm.
themselves. Some of them had businesses with their husband. I'm concerned for the children, what's motivating them to keep going. I'm 44 years old. I heavily rely on my parents for emotional support. I can't imagine what it's like to grow up as teenagers and in your 20s, especially without your parents. So some of the things that we see is that now the Baltimore Civic Fund was able to raise 1.1 million, and that money would run out this December, but now Baltimore Community Foundation was able to match that. So they do have an additional 2 more years, and as litigation happens, there might be some money coming in from
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
I know, and it was vague as it was said to me, but that the White House has made some promises to these families, and they're waiting and they're disappointed that nothing has happened yet. I'm
Yeah.
not sure what that's referring to, but I'll just leave it at that.
Um, I turned on my video because I wanted to jump in again, if you don't mind. And
Of
I am happy to speak to you further about union issues. I my work was as a litigator for the solicitor's office in the federal sector.
Thanks for coming,
unions.
Barry.
But I think it would be wonderful if what came out of this awful tragedy is that these workers could access union support. And I'm not sure exactly why they haven't been, but this kind of notoriety could help. So that might be a further avenue for you to take this.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Elsa, if you feel like putting your contact information in the chat, then maybe Maria has it and you two can get in touch with each other. That would be great.
You
Yeah.
should have my email. I'm an alum, but
Okay.
I can put my email in again if you like.
Yeah. Why don't you do that? Because that way it's a direct thing rather than going through us. Yeah. Maria, I was thinking when you were talking about the short films that you're doing, there's so many, ways to kind of focus. One could be very much about what does support healing, and that could be funded by one organization, right? And then another one could be one about labor issues and, who gets these jobs and who takes these jobs and what those issues are. And, and another one could be about, the fact that there's this, the one thing that I learned when I came on December 3rd was that range of impact, the fact that all these small businesses shut down and, there was nobody in the port, the people, the longshoremen lost their jobs for several months because there were no ships coming in, right? So the ripple effect of an event like this and how everything is so interconnected, So I think there's a lot of good ideas there that you're working on. So anyway, I want to thank you so much for sharing this project with us tonight, and thank you to those of you who joined us and asked such great questions. Maria, good luck with all of this, and let's stay in touch. I'd love to stay in the loop on what you're doing, and I've done a little bit of my own oral history project with women sea captains. And some of them are the ones that actually go out and, do inspections on the vessels when they come into port, sort of thing. So
Incredible work.
my heart's in the water with everybody. So yeah. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You being with us, and this was really wonderful.
Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing your thoughts. This was a very fruitful discussion that I will take with me and will reflect on. But thank you, Kaylin. I appreciate it. And I will let you know when the first film premieres.
Great. We'll post it on our website. That'll be great.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody.